Good afternoon, and thank you again for joining us in the 2022 MIT Sports Analytics Conference. My name is Zach Schmitz, and I'm a first-year MBA student at MIT Sloan. And I'm very excited to introduce to you guys our next panel, a one-on-one conversation with Calvin Johnson and Bomani Jones. Both don't need introductions, but Calvin Johnson, a former current NFL Hall of Famer, and a co-founder at Primitive, and Bomani Jones, a commentator and host at ESPN. Our panel will run for 55 minutes, and we will leave 10 minutes for questions at the end. Submit all of your questions on Twitter using Calvin Johnson one-on-one. Over to you, Bomani.
All right. I'm also going to start with shameless self-promotion. March 13th on HBO, I have a new show coming called Game Theory with Bomani Jones. Please check that out. I appreciate that. All that clapping ain't nothing. Watch it, damn it. Watch it. I was talking to Calvin a couple of days ago, because the fun fact is I went to college with his older sister at Clark Atlanta University, and I remember I was at some people's houses one day, and the Georgia Tech game was on, and this was his junior year, and it pops up, and somebody's like, oh yeah, man, so that's EJ's brother. I was like, oh wow, right? Like that was like, it really came home to me, and then it also drilled into me something we talked about a couple of days ago, where I said, you chose to go play football at Georgia Tech, which is really hard. Like a legitimate hard school for people who are only doing school.
Yeah. For
you playing football, doing that, like how rigorous and difficult was that?
I mean, one, as an athlete there at Georgia Tech, you stuck out like a sore thumb. You know, the academics there are extremely hard. I remember you told me the other day on the phone that, you know, somebody that was, you know, supposed to be really good academically got like a 2.5. You know, that made me feel very good about myself from my time at Tech. But I honestly went to Tech because, you know, I had Georgia Tech, and I had a couple other schools there in the Southeast that I was looking at. But my thing was, okay, if I go to Georgia Tech, if I get a degree from Georgia Tech, I can go work anywhere I want to work. And that was really the mind frame going to Tech. It wasn't that, you know, I'm going to go here and play football and make it to the NFL. Yeah, we wanted to do those things, but at the same time, just being realistic.
Mm-hmm. I also have another friend that knew him in high school, and when he would say these same things about getting a job, he was like, dude, you ain't gonna get no job. It was like abundantly clear on the team. It was like, what is this? I'm gonna be able to get a job wherever I go. Like, you ain't know where it was that you were going to get a job, but then football's over, and this new life begins with you, and you're working with this company, Primitive. And so if you could introduce to the people briefly what your company is doing in the cannabis space.
For sure. You know, Primitive, we founded it in Michigan several years ago. Basically, Primitive, the name means, the reason why we named it Primitive is because it's plant medicine that we use. Plant medicines in general have been, you know, been here for the ages, you know, and that's why we call it primitive, because it's been a way of healing that people have been using, you know, since the beginning of humankind. So I thought it was just a fitting name to make it Primitive.
And it's almost, I guess, a measure of irony now, because everything is a tech company, Rao. No matter what people make, they say that this is a tech company. But the cannabis space, I think, also feels futuristic to people because the acceptance in things has changed. But the point you make is a valid one, which is this is actually something that you could almost say is ancient. Mm-hmm. So for you, what was the journey toward getting to making the decision that this is something that you'd want to do as a business? Or even not just as a business, but it has to be a passionate pursuit to be willing to put the amount of energy into it that you are.
Yeah, two things. One of it is timing, and two is just my personal experience. You know, I'm so used to hearing growing up. I mean, I didn't touch cannabis until I got to college when I first started experimenting with it. But growing up, you know, it was something that affected the black community so much that, you know, my parents, anybody, a lot of people in the black community, you know, you get shunned, you know, if you're actually using it. You know, I couldn't go in my mom's house smelling like cannabis. You know, she'd probably kill me. You know, but I think that, you know, the other part of that is that, damn, I lost my point there.
Well, basically just to get you to making the decision that you want to do this as a business.
Yeah, the second part, I really wanted to get to the science of it. Because you're used to hearing everybody say, this is what this is negative, this is, you know, the bad stereotype with it. But for me personally, I knew it was good for, you know, it was great for sleep. I know it was great for anxiety. Some of the things that I might have dealt with, and I felt like it helped with those things unintentionally. It wasn't, I didn't set out for it to do these things. I was more trying to get recreationally, but it wasn't until, you know, I got to the league and was able to, you know, maybe partake a little bit more because, you know, you're in college, you don't have the funding to be able to, you know, go out and get those things. But being able to actually, you know, use it more, actually use it medicinally, you know, at that point. because you're dealing with pain, you're dealing with insomnia, and those things, you know, cannabis was able to help me with these things. And so at that point, I was like, okay, let's get to the science of this, because there's a lot of healing. This is a healer. So let's get to the science of it and find out what are these healing properties. And so I think that, you know, along with timing and being in Michigan at the time and the cannabis industry starting to bloom, starting to bud for about 4 years ago now, we're doing real estate after I played ball and started to find properties in the quote unquote green zones. And we were like, myself and my business partner, Rob, was like, hey man, like we know what a good team looks like. We're passionate about this because we use it for our own well-being, our own quality of life. Why not put together a team? We know what a good team and a bad team looks like being in Detroit. Let's put together a good team and make this something real. And so, I mean, long story short, this is where we are today.
Now, I'd be smoking a lot of weed if I played for the Lions too, personally. Like, I'm not to speak to you on this thing, but I mean, I would understand, but there's almost an irony to it though, because the NFL and it has changed now, but the prohibition they had on marijuana for the longest time. And one thing I always explain to people about those prohibitions in sports, never forget in the NBA, the prohibition did not come up until 1999. Like it wasn't some antiquity that made it all the way through and nobody changed it. When it was time to exert control over the players in 1999, they decided we were going to do this, except nobody actually wanted anybody to test positive because then it messes up with the money altogether. With the NFL, pain management is such a thing that happens, and teams can provide you things to help the pain that don't necessarily help you personally. What did you think as a player about the fact that, hey, you know, there's actually this thing that helps and is a whole lot safer, and they technically don't want you to do that?
It's that's the tough part about it. You know, it's almost like I was watching a video the other day where this dude had Parkinson's and he was taking an RSO and he was able to calm down his Parkinson's, so he could just literally stand there and hold his hands out. My buddy Peter was showing me this video, and his trouble with that was that he was in a state where it was still illegal. You know, he couldn't partake. And I think that's the toughest part about this, is that we see so many abilities, so many ways that the application of cannabinoids can help people, but obviously it being Schedule I, you know, it's only so much that we could do. Only private companies, yeah, they could put up money to research, but who can do that, you know, and still maintain their business? You know, the government's not allowing it, so it's upon universities to go and move the ball, advance the ball forward here in this industry. All right,
and so for people who don't quite know, when you say Schedule I, what do you mean?
That is illegal. It's the highest category of illegal substances.
And what's in the same? That's like cocaine
oxy,
and heroin.
Yeah, oxy, all those. You know, obviously the part of the epidemic going on right now with oxy and prescription drugs. So being able to have cannabis and show the benefits as an alternate healing agent, you know, it's important, especially right now with the epidemic that we're going through. But obviously, a lot goes into that, and like I was talking about, the Schedule I, being able to actually have government aid and research, you know, to push the ball forward. That's really where we got to go if we really want to, you know, advance cannabis as it should be. Obviously, adding the science and technology that we have to all these primitive plants, you know, that's really where we ought to go, where we should be heading in the future. And it's not putting synthetic things into our body. It's things derived of the earth. And cannabis cannabis and other plant medicines, you know, are derived from the earth, and they're okay to put in your body.
All right, so when you talk about the science behind your company, what is unique about what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so I think that for us, we have a couple pillars. I think one main thing is the research side of it. You know, being able to have an educational background, not just being out here and, you know, just trying to make as much money as we can. Of course, it's a business. You know, the dollars affect the bottom line, but it's really about the people. You know, it's really about helping the masses. And the end game, if we can, you know, get to a point where we're able to create different applications of cannabis and get it to the masses, I mean, that's really what the end goal is.
All right, so in the state of Michigan, where the laws have changed and now put you in a position where you could do this, what has been the progression for you, like within the state, and seeing how the laws have changed and how things have gotten easier for you to get this done?
I'm not gonna say it's gotten easier, you know, because regulations, they're still making them up and they're changing as time goes. I mean, for us, just being able to, be affluent really has been really the leg up for us, in this industry right now. But it's not quite the case for, so many others that look like me. Not everybody is able to, put up the money that it takes to run this kind of business. This takes millions of dollars, not tens of thousands, but millions of dollars to do these kind of things. So a big part of pushing this industry forward is having a positive effect on those that have been affected so negatively by cannabis. And that's really going into the social equity side of things. And the tough part about social equity in cannabis is that every state does it backwards. Every state waits until they get into a lawsuit by the minorities who weren't given a chance to get into the industry, and then we want to talk about social equity. So that's the tough part. The most frustrating part to me about this industry, the hardest part is just watching as those that have been affected not have an opportunity to partake in the industry.
So is there anything that you can do from your position to ease that part of it?
Really just to highlight the healing power of the plant, to help remove that negative stereotype, and just to really just put out in front and forefront for people's eyes to see is that this is a healer. This is something that obviously it's not something that's new. People have been using this for a long time. If we just go back and look at some research. But I'll break it down a little further. Really just understanding how cannabis affects your own body. Learning about your endocannabinoid system. Learning how the THC, CBD, and terpenes all come together to do different things within your body and understand what those different components and isolates do individually. I think there's so much that we as a people can do just to look back, take a step back and just learn about how it interacts with your body. And I feel like that'll take us a long way, and especially help us, fast forward to a point where, this can be personalized medicine.
Now, particular to, I guess, athletes, but really with football players, and I think something that is very easy for people to ignore is the amount of pain that football players, not just after playing, but also while they're playing, live with and endure. For you, where you talked about, perhaps going toward cannabis just for recreation and then finding these other things, had you also reached a point where you were also just looking for a solution to just day-to-day making it through an NFL season? Yeah,
I mean, that's part of that, the medical healing we're using, obviously. Just the day-to-day part, a big part of that is sleep. A big part of that is just dealing with your pain. So if you got something that can, take the edge off the pain, you got something that's gonna help you sleep through the night, I mean, that's the largest part in getting up the next day and having everything you need to go and do it again. And obviously, with us being in the NFL, it's a little different now. Halfway through my time in the NFL, they changed the drug policy kind of where it's not where you can just go in the trainer's office and get what you need, dig your hand in and get as many Vicodin or whatever you need, and I think that, the access to those kind of medicines was really just almost like a microcosm of society in general. We got to see people that get addicted to these things, and it leads to other things, but it's not the same with cannabis.
Yeah, like actually, my freshman year of college, right before we started, I'll never forget, the dude who ran our scholarship program looked at us, and he told us something that didn't make a lot of sense to me when I was 16 and listening to him, but he said, if I could, I would rather buy you all the weed you can smoke than you ever drink, but only one of them was legal, which didn't make a great deal of sense to me. But then I understood as I got older what he was saying. And I always wondered with the culture of football, while this outward prohibition existed, if behind the scenes, coaches and people like that understood what the trade was and we were just all keeping this, everybody just chill out about it and we won't have no problems.
Yeah, I mean, speak to that a little bit. I mean, everybody knew what the testing policy was, from the coaches on down. And it was pretty messed up that, the date it started on was 4/20. Between the time when we first started getting tested till like the time when we stopped is like August 8th or 9th, when training camp starts. But it's that window. Everybody knows it's the window. Once you get that test within that window, you're good until the next window comes around. But I just thought it was like a big forget you because they started at 4/20.
No, it was obvious spite, right? And I just wonder who the person was in the office that found out about it, right? Because there's somebody that came up to somebody at some office and was like, so do you know what April 20th is? No, tell me. Oh, well, we'll start it right then.
That's exactly what happened.
Anybody who knew wasn't going to do that. I think that's probably the best way that we wind up putting that. But for you, as a person, the transition into business, well, first of all, not just into business, but out of football.
Yeah.
For you, how smooth or not smooth was that transition?
When I got done playing, I was always looking forward to the time, over the last couple of years that, I get done, I don't have anything to do, I don't have a schedule, I can just sit down and chill out. I was looking forward to it. I enjoyed it my first couple months after playing, but it didn't take long for juices to get flowing. Like, man, I need something to do. So I just started in real estate. I started doing some real estate projects between Atlanta and Detroit. And, that was taking up my time. I was enjoying it. And then, like I said, got opportunities started to show up in the quote unquote green zones. And it took a couple of those opportunities to show up before we was like, let's do this. We were really just thinking like, man, like we could get the real estate, we could lease it out, to an operator and, just make our coin that way. But just having the passion, really wanting to get to the science of the plant, really like, and I go back to when I played ball, like, okay, if I want to be the greatest receiver I can be, I need to get down to the science of this route, of this position. So if I want to be the best cultivator or just operator in the cannabis space, let's get down to the science of the plant so that we can really, elevate and tell the masses, the good things, the healing properties that this plant has to offer. And it's really, I think that's big upon us being a sports figure because, I'm not saying everything's good for everybody, but what's good for the goose is good for the gander, So if we create products that are able to help us out, help our brethren out in the NFL, help out those that are dealing with pain, insomnia, even cognitive issues. Everybody has these issues. We can help the masses.
Now, one thing I want to ask before we go too far, you mentioned the green zones. What are those?
Yeah, green zones are areas where you can actually have cannabis operations. And I'm not sure how it works here in Michigan, but in Detroit, they're usually around industrial zones.
Got you. They all seem to be everywhere, like places where it's like, ooh, that's a strip club. Why is that here? Oh, and then you can grow your stuff.
Anybody in affluent areas, they're not going to want it. They're not going to want it in any kind of affluent areas. They feel like the smell is going to do this and that, even though everybody in that area, half of them have cannabis probably in their pocket. So, yeah.
So what kinds of products is Primitive making? Yeah.
So we started in cannabis. We started with the flower. The basis of everything that comes in this industry, all the products that come in this industry. But now, we speak in our mission that we want to be innovative in this space. And all that is just creating new applications for the masses to consume cannabinoids. And, the negative stereotype, part of the stigma that goes along with it is, part of it's the bad smell. I don't want to smoke and then go here and then I have it lingering on me all day. Or, I don't want to, that's really the big thing about it. But if you could create a way for people to medicate themselves, to elevate their wellness in a way that's discreet, in a way that's personal to them, I think that's really how we win.
All right, now you mentioned the stigma, and I wonder, is the stigma still a stigma at this point in time? Like, is it generational, or because now we're at the point now where it's almost like gambling, where it's legal in enough places and people aren't really necessarily shy about talking about it. Mm-hmm. So has it reached a point, especially where you are in doing business, where you're noticing perhaps that having to talk people into it, like you might have to talk your grandma into it, right? But otherwise, it's not quite as difficult as it had been.
To that point, I didn't talk my grandma into it, but I got my granddad's brothers, and I got the number one, is my mom. My mom, like when I first got into the industry, my mom dang near disowned me. Growing up in the South, Bible Belt, it was just for African American families, cannabis was just a big no-no. And that's not just African American families; it's really anybody. Especially if you're from the South, you just knew that you get caught with cannabis, you're going straight to jail. So having Miss Johnson convert over, and it's really through topicals, and education. It started with education. Just really having further conversations. What does the plant do? Breaking it down, talking about the different compounds, talking about your endocannabinoid system and how it interacts with your body. So I'm most proud to say that, I have my mom asking me for topicals, like anytime I come down to Georgia, because they're helping. She sees how they're helping her.
Yeah, I took a trip to Denver for a concert, and my mother asked me to bring her back a topical of salve, and I had to hit my brother and try to find out if this was a setup. Like she seemed far too comfortable asking me to do this. Like, what makes you even think that I would know how to get such things? What makes you think I would go to such a place? Like, I was really trying to figure out what level of lies I was going to have to tell, and then it was like, nah, she has, I forget which condition, and just that simple topical worked. And then I was like, oh, I guess I'll give this a try, because I was not looking for medicine. I was just going to Denver. And and came back around. I was just like, oh, okay, cool. This is where it goes. And so I wonder, as we talk about the stigma about as this industry is gone, for you, kind of the age ranges and demographics of people that you're going for, and is it kind of a thing where you have a specific way that you approach this for older people versus younger people?
I think that, yeah, you definitely got to have different methods. But one thing that I love to see in not only my stores, but other stores, you see 60 and over coming through. We have, at our store out in Niles, Michigan, we have a huge customer base that are older, that are elderly. And part of that is because obviously we're offering great prices. Part of that is, we have great customer service. That's a big part of it. But another big part of it is that, they feel like we're there to help. We feel like we're there to educate. We feel like we're definitely a cut above the rest out there. So I think that, my most pleasure comes in one, educating, and having that older crowd as customers, because I feel like from that it'll be a trickle down effect, and the stigma obviously isn't as strong with the younger generations.
Can you imagine a day where the NFL and Major League Baseball and the NHL and the NBA are the ones doing this educating for their players on this?
Honestly, maybe the NBA first, but MLB and NFL, hopefully they lean on some people that are in the industry like us to come out there and educate, because we've been in it, we're elbows deep in it, and we know it. So.
Yeah, I think the NFL has said that they want to do some measure of research into doing this, and I guess what I struggle with, and maybe you have a bit more institutional understanding of, something that makes sense why they would be so perhaps resistant to it, especially as the laws have changed in such ways that wouldn't cause them problems.
Rephrase that for me.
So, as things have changed and it's gone along, we have a product that we know can help its players.
Right.
And the laws overall are moving in a direction to make it to where there's no real restriction in doing that. And the federal government doesn't even seem that interested in really cracking down on people about it, at least under this administration. So why not?
I mean, that snowball's been rolling for a long time. It started in California, and every year there's more and more or states that vow in. At some point, and I think it probably happened not until all the states go in, that we'll actually see legislation or legalization. And honestly, that could be a long process. It could be. I was hoping that would happen within 5 years, but I was talking to somebody the other day, and we kind of broke down the different things that need to happen. And I'm like, man, that could be like a whole decade easily. Before you get the legislation, you got to get all the states on board, and states aren't going to give up their rights to how they, do it in their own state too. So to take everything and have one legal rule federally, and for that to permeate throughout the states, that's going to be tough. So I think it's going to take a lot of all those states coming together to make it happen. But first things first is just removing it from being Schedule 1 so that we can start to make the progress.
Well, do you think this is something that players would perhaps advocate toward as they push with the league? Because I've always wondered if the problem with them as a bargaining chip is asking if you can smoke weed really looks bad. Like, people just don't feel like that's the place that you're supposed to put your foot down. But even with these, benefits, I've wondered if for the players this was beneficial. We saw that with the bubble with the NBA, for example, that they decided basically, if we're gonna trap y'all in a hotel and y'all can't go nowhere, we really can't drug test you. That's just a really unfair thing for us to do. But it demonstrated, though, that some level of pushback could make life a lot easier, and we've seen things get a lot more lax.
Yeah, you got to have some pushback, but in the NFL, they kind of go as the government goes, really. I don't see too much happening there anytime soon.
Right. So we talk you and I have talked about this here, and you've mentioned some things and some terms, but other than just like this broad heading of pain, specific benefits that your products can work with, and just generally what all of these things can help with? What were some more specific things? Because I think a lot of people who are skeptical just hear, you talk to the wrong person, they're like, dude, it fixes everything. And they're like, yeah, everything. Okay, man. But specifically, where do you think there's something that these cannabis products help that I don't think people necessarily realize?
Well, I'll start with our focus. Our focus with in our research studies with Harvard, the IPI there, the International Phytomedicines Institute, And that's a consortium of schools from Harvard, Johns Hopkins, UPenn, even some schools down in Jamaica. But I think that going forward, you got to, I think that just hit me with the question.
Yeah, just kind of the specific things that people may not know that cannabis can help with.
Oh, I mean, like I say, go back to our points. We're focused on pain and cognitive issues. So pain is the most readily, available thing that people could grasp that it can help with. Insomnia is another thing that people could grasp. Anxiety. I could go down a list. You get into the different terpenes, the different cannabinoids, and what they do. They're able to inhibit your pain. They're able to, curb cancers. These are the things that we're seeing at Harvard that they're able to do with different cannabinoids. But like I say, it's so much more research that goes into it. It's a lot of change that has to happen too. There has to be different applications. We can't, expect it to be a panacea, a cure-all, and we're just, using it in its most primitive form and just smoking it. There's got to be other ways, and some of those other ways and some of the things that we're moving forward and being innovative in is when it comes to using nanotechnology. And that's the next part of, that's the next thing that's coming with primitive, is that's primitive performance, and it's really bringing cannabis and putting the science and the technology behind it, and creating such a small particle size, and that's measured in nanometers, that it could bypass the intestinal process and get right to the bloodstream. And then being that way, there's more bioavailability, because it doesn't get caught up in the intestinal tract, and you're losing it's not able to get to the bloodstream, and then in turn have its desired effect. So getting those particle sizes down, using different applications, providing, you got your topicals, you got your drinks, but in a form of nanotechnology, it's going to allow us to use less cannabis, but it be more impactful, more efficacious. So I think taking the industry there, obviously, is going to be a big part, and it's going to do a huge justice to removing the stigma and I guess the naysayers, surrounding cannabis.
So how do you sell and talk to the layman, for lack of a better term, about these technological things? Because I hear that and I'm like, wow, that sounds really interesting, technical, and the people are like, okay, but can I get high? How do you convey that message to people who might not be as sophisticated?
I think you could break it down. You could just tell them. I ain't gonna say you could just tell them, but just start. First thing I said, educate yourself in your endocannabinoid system, but that might be a lot. So what do you know about THC and CBD? THC, it creates psychoactive effects. CBD doesn't do the same thing, but it creates more bodily effects. So and then when you bring them all together, you have what is called Entourage Effect. And that Entourage Effect is the THC, the CBD, and the terpenes all working together. These are all different cannabinoids and components of the plant work together to create a better effect for whatever you're looking for. But in order to explain it, I guess in a layman's term, is that without saying, THC gets you high, CBD, can help you with your pain. So recreational, if you want to have recreational fun with it, I'm not going to say just use products using THC, because THC has a lot of medicinal benefits. Use that, like I say, in the Entourage Effect. But it's hard to just break it down in layman's terms, besides the fact that, it's a healer. And without going into all the different terms, everybody knows what cannabis is. People feel like, anytime you're altering your mind frame, it's a negative thing. But it's not necessarily the case when you have somebody that, you have kids that might be dealing with different ailments. You have a man that has Parkinson's, and they need these things to help them that other drugs can't do. So it's really, I think you can explain it best by what's the problem, and then, okay, what is the solution? Not necessarily what's the problem, what's the solution, but what is the issue at hand, and how can this help treat that solution? Okay, you have insomnia. Okay, THC and CBD can help you with your insomnia. At what dose? that's a lot of research that has to be done, because I think getting down to microdosing is going back to what I was talking about, personalized medicine. And that's where it's going. That's where this industry is going. But at the same time, there's so much research, like I was talking about earlier, that has to go through. And obviously, as private companies, we can't do it all.
Right.
Harvard, the IPI, they can't do it all. We need the federal government to step in.
Also, what role does the big pharmaceutical industry play in this? Because a lot of you are kind of competition, I guess we could say.
I would imagine that, you can only imagine that the pharmaceutical company doesn't want, not just cannabis, but plant medicine in general, to become prevalent again. But I honestly feel like once all the technology and science that they use with the synthetic drugs, if they just apply some of those things to these natural living plants that we have, we could come up with some great solutions.
All right, so I kind of want to talk about the role that athletes play in really advancing this discussion, because I think athletes are not only forward-facing figures, but also figures that we view as being healthy, if nothing else, that we know care about their bodies and all of this. So what do you think is the importance that the athlete plays in conveying the message that these products can be helpful to people?
Well, athletes have a loud voice. A lot of things, people look up to athletes. They look to see what they're doing and try to emulate some of those things, for good and bad. But I think that being able to, be a positive influence here in this space, educating people, just creating awareness, I think that's the best thing as athletes can do in the position that we're in. And obviously, coming from an authentic place from, where we've tried it, we've had our own experiences to the point now where we're elbows deep in the business, learning how it actually works, to now really getting down into the science of it and really trying to create those innovative products that we planned out to do. We got a long way to go in this industry, but I think athletes, celebrities in general, are what's going to change the minds of the masses.
Also, this is a business, right? And the economics of this are interesting. I think we're talking about a $30 billion industry is a number that gets thrown around a lot. So I think people look at this as almost being the easiest thing to get into to get money, right? Because, there's all these people want this product or whatever it is. But for you, in building the business and looking at the margins and everything else, what has that experience been like? Because as much as I'm sure you would like to help the world and heal all of our pain, you would also like to get paid.
Exactly. Like you say, it is a business. And what I found to be the toughest thing in this business is really just the people. You could put all the processes in place and have all that stuff set out, all your SOPs, everybody knows what to do, but it's really just dealing with the people issues, making sure your culture is right. Obviously, you're going to deal with the numbers, but it's really people and culture. That's really the toughest thing. It's not so much as tough. It's just really just setting the foundation at the beginning so that everybody comes in, they're under the same VMC, they're under the same mission, vision, and operate with the same kind of core values. I think that understanding that part of it, having and building a team, that's really the mission, is really to put a team, people best in class together that can come together, achieving for excellence under that one goal. That's really what the mission is. The vision is to create products to, help people understand the healing properties of the plant and to be innovative in the industry. But you have to have a great team in order to do those things that you plan on doing that are all on the same accord.
And one thing also about this industry, you guys attract really passionate people to work within this. Like I took a tour of another company a while ago, and that was the thing is, and not even, I think people get in the stereotypical Cheech and Chong type stuff when they look at it, but this is a space where the people who work in it typically are really, really into what it is that they're doing.
Oh yeah, passionate. People are passionate. It's hard not to be passionate. You get to walk in a room of flowers, varying scents and fragrances, and just to be able to, to work with a living object and know that your care, whatever you put into this thing, it's going to exude that. So, being able to be in this industry, I'm not necessarily in the flower rooms, but it's awesome just to go into these rooms and understand that, hey, that someday you're going to be helping somebody.
Yeah, but there's also some dude over there acting like it's a damn bonsai tree and just like every Edward Scissorhands move that you could possibly make and everything else. Like this is, I've been waiting for somebody to make a television show about one of these companies or somewhere, just like an actual company, not somebody running the underground, because it is just like any other show that you have. Okay, well, there we go. 2023
New
on
version
HBO.
of Weeds.
So your former teammates and former players, like how many of them have you dealt with that are also operating in the same space?
Probably got a handful of guys that are operating in the same space. It's not like I say, for one, you got to be in the right state. Your state might not have it. So being in Michigan, there's some, Boston's the area, obviously Cali, but that market is already so saturated. So, you're looking for new markets. And most of the guys I know, they are over here on the East Coast for the most part because that's where all the new markets are, and they have a chance to, make some hay from the ground up.
So I'm curious, you personally, if you did not have the access to these healing mechanisms, how much different do you think your post-playing career would be?
If I didn't have access to cannabis, during my, just my playing days and whatnot,
and after now,
probably would have stopped playing a lot earlier. I probably 100%. I was going to retire the year before I actually did, but my dad taught me in the stand, so yeah, I would have retired earlier.
Well, why did you say when your dad talked you into it? What made you want to stay at that point?
The only reason why I stayed was because he asked me, you think you could do it again? And I paused, sat there and thought about it. He was like, since you're thinking about it, you could do it again. But it's really just the pain at the end of the day what made me just fall out of love with it. You're doing something and you're just constantly living in pain while you're doing it. There's no quality of life behind that. And it's really that's really what we want to be able to help everybody with. It's just quality of life. Your ailment might be different from whatever somebody else is dealing with. And I'm not saying cannabis is a panacea, but plant medicines in general, there's a solution. I truly feel like the Lord put everything we need on this earth that we need. So, yeah.
One thing I'm curious about with football players, because I always say you get into it when it's just fun and when your body can bounce back, and there's no way when you're 14 and you're going for this, like what is going to be on the back end. Like, at what point did you realize, like, as a player, like, oh, this is just what it's going to feel like?
It wasn't until the NFL. You're in college. Don't really get hurt. Don't need massages twice a week. You don't have to use a chiropractor or whatnot. It's just once you get into the league, though, just everybody's bigger, faster. That's when it hits. And you're going through all your ailments, and that's really when my cannabis use really started to pick up. Especially for me, they're offering us the Vicodins, the Oxycontins, the Percocet. For me, that just made me feel terrible. My whole sense of like balance and proprioception was off, and so just sick to the stomach. I remember when I jacked up my finger, they'd give me a whole bottle of Percocet and Vicodins to take, and I was in New York. It was not legal at the time, but I was feeling so terrible from the Percocet and the Vicodin that they gave me for my finger that I would just limit myself and maybe take one in the morning just to knock off the edge. But then I would just use cannabis. Whether it was an edible or I'll actually smoke for the rest of the day, just to get me throughout the day, just because the effect that those substances had on my body. It's not the same for everybody, but for me, it just wasn't for me. And I feel like anything, like I say, that comes from the earth is free to go in my body.
And you also mentioned, like, cognitively, the effects that this has. And I remember I was talking to one former player, and I think this was less cognitive than it was mood-based depression and things like that. And he just reached out to me, and I don't even know him that well. I try to reach out and just say, hey, man, is there anything that's helping out? And the response on the text was, weed, LOL. But the LOL wasn't a laugh. Like, this was the thing that he used to kind of balance and measure himself. Right. So with the cognitive stuff, I do wonder, I think that's another term that feels kind of broad to people. Yep. Like, kind of specifically, what does it do for you cognitively?
Cognitively, for cannabis use, it really just goes back to rest. Now, if you're not resting, if you're not getting the hours that you need, you can't function. Your reflexes aren't as quick as they usually are. As far as cannabis and cognitive function, there's a lot of research going on right now. When I think cognitive function, I'm thinking more. There's other plant medicines that we're seeing that are able to help out more as far as cognitive function, like psilocybin, mushrooms, I just say. But being able to, apply different plant medicines, not just cannabis. Yeah, we're a cannabis company, but I really like to think we're a plant medicine company at the end of the day. And cannabis can help cognitively and mentally. The research, obviously, we're not doing that research, but the research is out there from Harvard, from the IPI, that there's some benefits there. But I think that goes more so into another plant medicine. And I'm not saying psilocybin is the end-all, be-all, but there are a lot more other plant medicines that I think that could help out with cognitive and mental function.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I really hadn't thought too much about is the potential for this to be a bridge to these other plant medicines. And is that kind of the direction where this game is going for others?
I mean, at the end of the day, we can't limit ourselves and leave everything in front of us. At the end of the day, plant medicines is really what it is. Cannabis is our focus right now, but plant medicine in general, that's really what the IPI is here, that when we're working with the consortium of schools. It's the International Phytomedicine Institute. Phytomedicine just means plant medicine. And it's amazing just to see the different plant medicines from around the world in different regions that are able to do different things, whether it's helping with cancer or helping with your, whether you have hunger issues, a variety of things. But right now, the focus for us is cannabis and dealing with pain.
Now, a bit of a philosophical dilemma. When you take something like this that does good for people and then infuse it with a healthy dose of good old-fashioned American capitalism, it normally doesn't do good things for people very long. So how do you think this industry will fare as it becomes more commodified? As you see things like Philip Morris and those people, for example, getting themselves prepared to make the move into the market.
I mean, I imagine that, farmers are going to be like, okay, this plant medicine is dipping into our pockets a little too much. Let's go take them all. Let's go buy them up. And eventually, I mean, that's already happening. You're starting to see big companies come in, whether it's, multi-state operators, they're coming in and trying to gobble up as much as they can. And I mean, you just don't want it to go corporate because there's a culture behind cannabis that's, you can't replace it. The culture behind cannabis is nothing like corporate. It's about healing. It's about elevating your wellness through the plants. And corporate, they can't replicate that. They can't replicate that culture. And usually that's what I mean, when the corporate structure comes and takes over, it's not gonna be good for anybody else. It's not gonna be good for the man that's really trying to find another alternative way to heal himself or to help us, find solutions for his pains or whatever issues he's going through.
Well, something I think that's interesting in what you described there is that I think when people think about the culture, they're thinking about something like totally different than what you say. And so at first I was wondering if for some people you have to lean away from the culture, at least the perception that people have. But the truth is, for what you're doing, there's an existing culture that actually is much easier for you because you can lean into it. And that's a big distinction that we wind up with this. So I'm curious, 10 years from now, where do you see this all going?
10 years from now, I expect a lot of innovation in the industry. It's starting to happen. I expect there to be, people using, when we're just talking about cannabis, right now it's probably like, 65% flower use to, 35%, processed goods. In 10 years from now, I honestly expect to see that flip-flop. People not using as much flower, and mainly because there are better applications, more direct applications that people are able to get, what they want, what they need personally. Like I was talking about personalized medicine.
And so for you, all of this as it's gone and starting this business and getting it going and everything else, what is maybe the hardest thing that you came across in it that you didn't realize was going to be on the other side?
Hardest thing I've come across in this industry, I mean, like I said, besides the people issues that you deal with, just making sure those people that are on your team are there for the right reasons. Obviously, that's another people or issue, but it's really just a people issue because, like I said, the processes are easy. It's just finding the right people to work with. I've been in business for a little bit, and ever since I retired, I've been burnt, and it's hard to find quality people that aren't just looking out for themselves and have a larger vision about the things that they want to do in their life and how they want to help people. And it's really about finding people that are evenly yoked and people that are ready to serve. I feel like that's the main denominator between the people that we work with. Everybody's here to serve.
All right, and we have questions from our wonderful audience here that hopefully this thing ain't got no password on it. Whew, all right. That was my biggest fear, is that I was gonna sit here and have to get a password and then get somebody else to go check this out. All right, let's see. All right, so first question we got here. What did you have to learn when starting and supporting a full-time business that you didn't know when you were a full-time athlete?
You gotta have goals. You gotta have a vision. In our company, we call it a VMC. And I should have known this coming into the cannabis industry because, my foundation, we have a VMC and what we stand for. But that wasn't the first thing that I did when I came here. We kind of just, got thrown into it and was just trying to scramble and do this and that without setting up the correct foundation for us to stand on. And obviously, you know, without setting your foundation, you're standing on sand, you're going to go whichever way the wind blows you. So, you know, being able to, set ourselves up for success by putting everything in front of us that we wanted to do and putting down the things on paper that bring us together, like our core values, and obviously putting our vision and mission statement together, and obviously operating under that, using that as a filter for everything that comes in. You know, anything from a partnership that you want to do to a deal or whatever you want to do, but just dropping it through that filter and just seeing if it checks off amongst most of the things that are in your core values, and that lends itself to being okay to partake in whatever that is that you're aiming to do.
And see, it's interesting because I would think that would be like one of the more transferable things from athletics, because that's what all the coaches are always talking about is culture and all of that, right?
Not Detroit. Not Detroit.
Yeah, I was trying to avoid telling that joke myself, but now that you did, I was like, yeah, maybe you don't learn a winning culture with the Detroit Lions. There we go. Our next question is, where do you see the biggest opportunity for growth in the industry?
The biggest opportunity for growth I'm seeing right now in the industry, obviously it's going to come with innovation, and I'll just go back to creating new applications for the plant. That's part of the stereotype, like in the stigma, the smoking of the plant, but creating, like I say, educating folks on what it does, and creating different avenues for people to partake. Not that everybody wants to partake, but if you can, pull on somebody's heartstrings and with ways that it can help them in their ailments, there's something to say for it. There's something there.
Got you. Now, our next question. Obviously, CTE is a big conversation in the NFL. Is there research that suggests that cannabis products could ease the effects of CTE or even improve the condition itself?
Going back to the IPI, they do have research where they're doing on mice, and they are able to affect the brain and stop and shrink the tumor size of mice in their brains and in their bodies. So yes, there is education, there is research done on it. I'm not sure about the publication of those research papers, but I'll just go back to what I was saying earlier, We're in this place right now of not knowing solely because it was taken away from us. I'm not gonna say way back when, but I forget how many years ago, but it was taken away from us from being that healing agent. So we have a long way to go. Will it happen in 10 years? Will we really fully understand the cannabinoids of this plant in 10 years? I would love to, but I doubt it. It's really going to take, like I say, legalization. But I think that a lot of it's going to happen. A lot of the progress in this industry is just going to happen with research.
And not to go all Holiday and Express on it, but one of the trick bags of talking about CTE is they don't really know you have CTE until you're dead.
Yeah.
And so it's become kind of this catch-all phrase, almost in an unfortunate way, where anything happens, involving a football player, like, oh, it's a CTE. Part of what's tricky is that when CTE is found in these cases is often where you have reason to believe that CTE is there in the first place. And so you wind up with this confirmation bias that comes up because it's like, hey, I think that guy has CTE. What do you know? We had CTE. And that figuring things out for that is always going to be difficult until they find a way to diagnose it while people are actually alive, because otherwise all they're really doing is going back and gaining an understanding for things that had happened previously. So I noticed that happen a lot when people have these discussions, and I imagine for football players now that everybody got a term to call it, right? Like, CTE, ha ha ha. Yeah, kind of funny.
It's not funny.
Yeah, no, like my buddy Dominique Fosberg, he talked about seeing the Concussion movie, and he was like, it's like watching a horror movie, except it's about you.
Oh man, that was a little chilling.
Yeah,
it was.
That's what he said. He was just like, oh, so this is me. Like this thing is not. We're talking directly about my own life.
It's scary because you think about all the times you've whether come in contact with the ground. You just don't know.
Right.
But there's ways that that's part of it, man. Finding solutions for cognitive issues. That's part of our goals with the IPI. So to be able to help our brethren, obviously we're doing that in the cannabis space, but to be able to do something from the cognitive and mental side of it, that's next level for us.
All right. Next question. To what extent do folks need to try different methods to find what will help them with their health problems?
To what extent? I don't know if there is an extent, as long as it's not detrimental to your health. I don't think that, finding a way to, heal your body naturally, I don't think you should exhaust all options, honestly. I know, people that are dealing with, life and death issues, that's what they're doing. They're trying to exhaust every option they can, They're trying to get all the research operations that they can get, there's no point, I think, that, when you're trying to affect your health and your quality of life, I don't think you can exhaust that. I think that you just keep going until you could try to find it, or you're not here no more.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to go Holiday Inn Express twice on you in one panel, but I would say what extents to find things that will help. I don't know where the point is where I'm like, man, I just looked, but you know what? I'm not going to look no more. There may be something else on the other side. No, I'm just going to take this shit. Whatever it is, I'm just going to sit around in pain. I'm sick of looking. No. Keep going.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess this does kind of take to a different place, though, because I think the direction that this question probably goes in is more toward what we're talking about. I guess because of some of the absence of research that we're talking about, it's almost to a lot of people unverified, and they would feel like they were making an experimental move by trying something like this, regardless of how founded it may be and what's happened in history. Like, it's when people start talking about like Eastern medicine and the things they read, and you're like, oh yeah, so this little thing's gonna do that. Except the thing is, every now and then it really does.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Plant medicine, things derived of the earth. I feel like they're put here for a reason. God put them here for a reason, for us to find them and figure out how to use them best for us.
So you mentioned earlier that the big pharma's coming and buying up these companies.
Yep.
Are you saying that there's not a number they could throw at you to make you take this operation and hand it over to the overlord?
I mean, at the end of the day, we all in this industry would love to be able to sell our process, our IP to a larger company, but at the end of the day, being able to help people, that's really what it's all about. We got into the industry, yeah, we want to make some hay here, but at the same time, being able to see and meet those people that we're helping, that just makes you be like, okay, how do we set this business up for the long term so that we can continue to do what we want to do and pass it along to our children? Yeah, if the opportunity comes to be able to, for somebody to acquiesce us, and that's great. We'll look at it when the time comes.
All right, so as we're wrapping this up, make sure that people know how they can find Primitive to get more information about what you're doing.
Indeed, yeah. Check us out at primitivegroup.com. Look forward to dropping a new product line called Primitive Performance, and that really revolves around us using nanotechnology and being able to, and what nanotechnology does versus the processed oils that people put in drinks or all the processed goods, the edibles. It's just more bioavailability, meaning it gets to your bloodstream instead of being consumed in your gut. So it's better for the body. Not that the other products that aren't nano aren't good for the body, they're just not as effective.
Now, currently you were just in Michigan. Are there plans to move this to other states?
Yes. Obviously, we want to take care of our background first, but I mean, we have brothers in different states that are doing cannabis, have cannabis operations. We've spoken to them. So, I mean, it could look like a licensing deal. It could be brick and mortar. Obviously, brick and mortar is a little bit harder, but licensing deals it allows us to take our product, whether it's the Primitive Performance, which would be both THC and CBD, so you can have the e-commerce side to it because there's no THC in it. You can sell it online, with CBD being legal. But that's where we're going.
All right, and that is Primitive.
Yes, primitive without the E on the end. It's very, very primitive.
That's it. Got to make. It's just the thing. You got to make sure. It's like naming your barbershop.
You're right.
You got to spell it out sometime.
Primitive Group without the E. Primitivegroup.com. Please check it out.
All right, and want to thank everybody for joining us here in the Bill James room, and thank you for that applause.